Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone suddenly became a smaller number. I'm Anne-Marie Smith, as Caitlin said, and I'm the Ethical Practices and Governance Officer for DAMA International. I'm also a consultant with 25 years' experience in enterprise data management, primarily in things like data governance, master data management, and data quality. The reason I stress this is because today we're not talking about big data. Everything that I will discuss today can be applied to very little data as well as big data. The size of the data set does not matter when it comes to talking about the overall value of the management of data and the ethics that should be applied to data management. Okay? So for a few minutes, forget about the fact that we are at a big data conference. Ethics and ethical practices in the management of data apply to any size data set. Every organization has data. Every single organization has data. I've placed on this screen a bunch of organizational logos. I'm going to ask you to take a look at them. And there's a reason why these organizations are on that screen. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Now, I don't have an iPod to give away. DAMA is a non-profit organization. However, a round of applause will be engendered for anybody who can come up with the reason I placed these specific organizations' logos on this slide. No, not donations. Most of them are for profit. They've all had data breaches. What's your name? John Tench. You're absolutely right. John, round of applause. They've all had data breaches, and all of those breaches were as a result of challenges in the ethical use of data. Some of them were truly nefarious. Others were lapses in judgment that were, shall we say, inadvertent. Now, those lapses in judgment that were inadvertent were not necessarily illegal, which brings us to the difference in definitions. Everybody has ethics. That's a statement that one time somebody challenged me to. And I said, okay, fine. I would actually ask you to think about that, because everybody has ethics as defined by the fact that it's a voluntary code of behavior, outlining your personal responsibility. And the funny thing is, organizations have ethics, either in fact or just through practice. How many of you have established your own personal ethical code? Things you will not do. You don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you work for organizations that have ethical codes, ethical practices? There, I'd like to see a show of hands. Do your personal practices, your personal ethical beliefs align with your organization's codes? Yes or no? You don't have to raise your hands. Think about that. That is an important issue, especially for those of us who work in the data management field. And with the emergence of big data, I would submit that eventually every single one of us will be working in data management in one way or another. So it is incredibly important for all of us, one, to establish our personal ethical stance. What does ethics require of me to do, especially as it concerns data management? The management of data that I am responsible for and the management of data that I will be interacting with. And two, what does my company think about ethical behavior? What does my company think about the management of data from an ethical perspective? Conversely, we have law. Now, laws are made for specific reasons. They're systems of rules that have been imposed by some form of governmental entity. The way society is going to behave in order to produce certain results. Actions can be legal, and at the same time, those actions may not subscribe to a particular code of ethics. In the prior slide, some of the data breaches that were engendered here were not necessarily illegal, but may have compromised a particular organization's ethical practices. And then in some cases, the activities were so illegal as to land the perpetrators and executives in all sorts of state, federal, in some cases provincial hot water and prison time. Our modern culture has a very disconcerting view of ethics versus law, especially as it regards to data. Many people don't think about it at all. And if challenged, many people say it's okay that other people are collecting their data as long as it doesn't personally affect them. How many of you are users of a social media site? Facebook, Google+, MySpace, etc. How many of you have read very closely, carefully, and examined the terms and conditions and privacy statements of those social media sites? Oh, somebody raised their hand. What's your name? Jen, thank you so much. Sometimes people don't read it. Many people don't. You're the only person whose hand was raised. I don't know that that means you're the only person in the room who has actually read it, or because it's right after lunch and people ate those lovely sweet desserts, nobody's really got the energy to raise their hands. What did you think of those privacy statements? That's why I don't join any apps on Facebook either. No, they're not getting all of that data from me because I have no idea what they're going to do with it. And no, I don't trust them. One of the biggest movements in the realm of data ethics over the last few years is a concept called organizational stewardship. Has anyone heard of that concept? It's a concept in management science that states that we, both as individuals and as part of an organization, are stewards of the organization's resources. Now, how many of us work in data? How many of us believe that data is a resource? The old name for DAMA, the Data Management Association, was the Data Administration and Resource Association. Data is a resource. Therefore, we are stewards of the data. Organizational stewardship means that we are responsible for the best care, feeding, nurturing of the data and information that the organization has captured from an ethical perspective. Now, in many companies, the IT organization says, oh, that's a business issue. We only deal with the technology side of the house. We are concerned with the hardware it sits on, the networks that run it, the bits and bytes stuff. The business side says, that's a technology issue. IT is responsible for the data. We just gather that information in, and it stays on servers. It runs through networks. It gets to us through keyboards, etc. It's not a business issue. Well, guess what? They're both wrong. The ethical use of data and the management of data ethically, I said that both ways, is a human issue. And it is incredibly important for us to be concerned about an ethical approach to data management for many, many reasons. How many of you have followed over the last few years the challenges to data breaches that companies similar to the ones I showed at the start of this presentation have had. I know I have. I know that there are many banking organizations that are under restrictions in both the United States and Canada and around the world for the use of data that may not be specifically illegal, but could be pseudo-legal, where they have challenges on the use of data without sufficient monitoring of the data properly. Not too long ago, I was asked to write a white paper on ethics and data management. And one of the seminal points in that paper was that all of those who are part of the data management profession have the responsibility for the proper use and welfare of the assets that represent the people, places, and things that are of value to the organization. That paper, Using Data with Integrity, A New View of Data Management, I'm reading from it so that I quote properly, can be found on this conference's website blog. So if you're interested in a more thorough treatment of this topic, please go to the conference website blog and it will be there. In the ethical issues of data management, there are some absolute fundamental points. For us to have any trust in the organizations that capture, store, use, and then disseminate the data back to us, we must be grounded in both our personal view of data management ethics and in our view of their ethics. If we don't know what the ethics are of the companies that we're doing business with, we can't have that foundational trust. BusinessWeek did a survey, as well as InformationWeek. So two respected companies did surveys in the last 18 months that said, and they did a survey, each one of them did a survey of about 1,500 readers. Not a large sample given the fact that they have very wide samples, readerships, but they each did a survey of about 1,500 readers. Their surveys came out fairly similar. In BusinessWeek's survey, 67% of the respondents said that they would prefer to deal with companies whose ethics in data management they were aware of and whose ethics in data management reflected their own personal beliefs in how management should treat their personal data. Okay, 67%. InformationWeek, the figure was a bit higher. It was actually 75%. That's pretty cool. However, when asked, did you know the ethical stances of the major 5 companies that you do business with, only 22% of BusinessWeek and only 31% of InformationWeek respondents replied positively. So although it's important to 2/3 to 3/4 of the respondents, only about 1/4 of the respondents actually knew how the companies they did the most work with felt ethically about data management. Really big dichotomy there. Another fundamental point is that companies have to have support for operational and decision-making capabilities. So there has to be some technological capability to make the ethical management of data possible. And another main point driving this is compliance and governance issues. In both the United States and Canada, regulations are steering organizations toward a more proactive use of ethics as part of their operating modes. If companies aren't willing to do it themselves, governments are going to force them to become more ethically aware. As data management professionals, experts feel we have the duty to govern and work with data ethically. Because as the keepers of the data management profession, we should know more than the average person. Many data management professionals have developed a code of data management ethics. How many of you have heard of the certification CDMP, Certified Data Management Professional? I knew you would, John. One of the things that's required of any certified data management professional, just like a project management professional, is adherence to a code of ethics. And in studying for the CDMP, there are questions on general ethical risks. Some of them are as follows. Data aggregation and reconstitution. Aggregating data to achieve a particular result. Creating bias in collection and use. Data cleaning and standardization. That should be done only according to established rules, business rules that have been approved by business subject matter experts. Avoiding data profiling except where absolutely necessary. Making sure that the international movement of personal data conforms to laws. In certain countries, you cannot move personal data. And the information dissemination within and across countries. There are ethical risks associated with each of these. For a more detailed assessment of each of these risks, please feel free to see that article, post it on the website. Codes of ethics, policies, and principles. Every company should have a code of ethics. Every company should have a governance council, both at the data management area and at the corporate level, who sets and maintains policies and directs implementations of ethical practices. And remember, practices and policies are worthless unless they are socialized. As Martin said this morning in his keynote, you can have all the policies you want, but if they aren't inculcated into the organization, they're worthless. Some recommendations. From an ethical perspective, do not use information to support actions so that individuals only can profit. Don't disclose information about individuals without prior supervisor authorization. Do not engage in administrative voyeurism. Does anybody know what that might mean? Let me go see how much John makes. I'm a DBA. I have access to all the records in the company. I can find out how much John makes, and then I'll go tell Caitlin. I know she's up for a raise, and she might be able to use that data, and then maybe I can get that date I want. That's administrative voyeurism, and that's truly unethical. Do not provide access for others for data sets that are broader than those available. And don't choose data to support a predetermined outcome for analysis. I have a PhD. And in my doctoral cohort, somebody tried to do that. They got thrown out of the program. They did. They did. They fudged the data sets to support their desired outcome for the thesis. It was discovered. It always is discovered. When it was discovered, he was unceremoniously tossed out of the program. What are you supposed to do? What are the key things I want you to remember from this? I want each of you and your colleagues, when you talk about this afterwards, if you don't do what Michael Wong's boss said, and actually remember this presentation 24 hours from now, convene and participate in public ethics forums through DAMA. DAMA is a worldwide professional organization for people in the data management field. You don't even have to go anywhere. There's a data ethics forum on LinkedIn. Join it. It's very active. Establish organizational data ethics forums through the data governance and enterprise data management areas in your organization. Establish them and sustain them. Resist the narrow approach that's usually costly and usually technologically limiting. This is a human issue, it's a business issue. And demand organizational accountability for ethics and data management. From yourself, from your colleagues, from your organization as a whole. It's part of data management accountability. It's part of accountability for the organization's approach to stewardship. There's a really good book called Big Data Ethics by a gentleman named Cord Davis. K-O-R-D Davis. It has a lot of templates in it. It's not that big. It's published by O'Reilly. And if you're interested in the topic from an implementation perspective, I recommend it. For more details on the subject, please feel free to visit the DAMA International website. Feel free to visit the Data Ethics LinkedIn group. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. It's a challenging topic, I know, and one that can be thought-provoking, especially when anybody uses the word ethics.